Well, coming up on today's show, Porsche sets records in a plug-in, the base Model 3 is still a priority for Tesla, and Dongfeng with Nissan want to include 20 electrified models on their future roadmap. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening wherever you are in the world. Hello and welcome to the Wednesday, the 15th of August edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transport. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the 59 patrons of this podcast, whose generosity means I get to produce this show for you for free, which aims to entertain and inform thousands of listeners every day about a brighter future. People ask sometimes why I make the podcast. It's stories like this that motivate me to work so hard to make this for you every day. Babies and young children in prams can be exposed to up to 60% more pollution than adults. A new study suggests experts said infants were exposed to a dirtier air in prams because they were lower to the ground and closer to exhaust pipes from cars. Reports the BBC they're also more at risk from health dangers of dirty air because their bodies are small and developing. The study's authors said avoiding busy roads and using pram covers were some ways to try and reduce pollution exposure to your babies. Because pollution levels are greater at 1 metre or less to the ground, infants are being exposed to up to 60% more fine particulate air pollution than adults. The evidence indicates. Professor Prashant Kumar from the study said this, and I quote, "When you consider how vulnerable they are because of their tissues, their immune systems and brain development at this early stage of their life, it's extremely worrying that they're being exposed to these dangerous levels of pollution," end quote. A link to that story in the show notes. There's some motivation to, when I'm absolutely shattered after a day at work or lots of travelling and sometimes don't feel like opening the laptop, boom. A story like that just does it every time. So motivated to make this show bigger and better and to reach more people. And thank you to you if you help out on Patreon. Let's kick off with Porsche, and Porsche is breaking some lap records on 6 circuits with a plug-in, the Porsche Panamera Turbo SE Hybrid. It's a plug-in, and it's been on a tour of FIA-approved circuits to break lap records, according to some new video clips making their way onto YouTube. So the specs first up then, the plug-in hybrid can cost up to $199,000 for the executive model of the Panamera e-hybrid, and it's the second most powerful car in the Porsche lineup. First of all, we saw the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi, where we see the Formula 1 cars, and then Sakir in Bahrain is shown. I'm expecting more clips from the 4 remaining circuits to hit the internet very soon. It's interesting that Porsche want to do this. It's their reputation perhaps under threat from new EVs, things like the Tesla Roadster, which is going to be 0 to 60 in less than 2 seconds, even from a Model 3 performance. I mean, there are some Porsches which would be scared off by a 0 to 60 time of 3.2 seconds, which some people, some early owners of the Model 3 Performance Edition have been recording. 3 seconds, 0 to 60, is firmly sports car territory. Great news that Porsche are repositioning EVs for the petrol heads as well. You can easily write off EVs when you see them as kind of small, funky-looking little cars, but when you get fast Porsches, the petrol heads scratch their petrol heads and go, oh, maybe there's something in batteries. With the Porsche Taycan, they're defending their years of brand building of one of the fastest car makers in the world. Well, I mentioned the Model 3. So many critics will bet that you'll never see a Model 3 being sold for $35,000. They say things like, I'll eat my hat if Tesla ever make a profit. And they will do this quarter. They say, I'll delete my Twitter account if they ever make more than 1,000 Model 3s per week. Well, they're about to make 6,000. Those Twitter accounts haven't been deleted yet. They say, never in my lifetime will I see a Model 3 made. Well, for over a year now, Tesla have been making Model 3, so we don't listen too much, do we, to those EV critics. Elon's been back on Twitter, and Elon Musk was responding to a question specifically about the new Roadster. He said this, production design will be better, especially in details. We are dying to do this, but primary focus must remain on making affordable versions of the Model 3 and bringing Model Y to market. So he's still talking about that $35,000 Model 3. The last guidance from Elon Musk at the shareholder meeting, and Inside EVs have very kindly transcribed it and put it online. He said this, and I quote, "We will definitely offer a $35,000 version of the Model 3, and probably at the end of the year is when we'll be able to make a smaller version of the battery pack and get into volume production of $35,000 version in Q1 next year. We would honour that obligation, and we would do so right now if it were possible," end quote. Well, for those with an itchy finger on their mouse in the design studio, if you really must upgrade your $35,000 Tesla when it's available early next year, they did confirm as well that the standard range battery will be able to be up-spec'd to a dual motor version. Well, Elon Musk was actually replying to Fred Lambert on that question on Twitter, and Fred from Electric reminded us today of something from the Q2 earnings call when they said this, and I quote, "We came up with a new design that achieves the same outcome that's actually lighter, better, cheaper, and we'll be introducing that around the end of this year." Talking battery packs, of course. Probably reach volume production in Q1. That'll make the car lighter, better, and cheaper, and achieve higher range, end quote. So they're saying that they've made such improvements with the battery technology that is probably going to allow them to make a decent profit, have good margin on the $35,000 Model 3 as promised. And one of the things that struck me as well over the last couple of days, I've seen a bit of a slew of articles from experts. I love these experts saying, in my professional opinion, I think you'll find that $100 per kilowatt hour on a battery pack will be achieved within the next 3 to 5 years. Well, Elon Musk said recently that they've already achieved $100 per kilowatt hour at cell level. He would expect the battery pack level to be somewhere near that by the end of this year, if not, then very soon after. So, well done, experts, for not paying any attention to public statements that are out there on the internet and making something up yourself to sound like you're very, very clever in front of the media. Well, Dongfeng have released their Green 2020 plan. Dongfeng's rollout is a green focus with production and materials being used, but the big headline is 20 electrified models under its 4 brands by 2022. Those electrified models being pure EV and e-Power, with Nissan's e-Power technology available on all the core models. Well, by 2022, a third, about 30% of Dongfeng, or DFL, sales is going to be EV and e-Power. They plan to introduce advanced battery regen technology to lower environmental pollution, increase vehicle recycling value and waste. Commercial energy storage is going to be part of their plan as well to put recycled batteries to use, providing a stable power supply for local communities and industries once energy users reach peak electricity consumption. My only comment on that would be it's great that Dongfeng are doing that along with Nissan as part of their joint venture, and the e-Power technology is really popular, but you do have to put fossil fuels inside it. As a reminder, it's e-Power technology this sits in a weird place. Okay, so there is a battery of a few kilowatt hours. The battery always drives an electric motor for the drivetrain, but the engine inside it permanently is a generator. So it can't run, there's no plug socket on it, on the e-Power Nissan stuff. So if it doesn't come with a plug, I don't think it should be called an EV. It should be called a hybrid or e-Power, whatever label you want to do it. But lots of people are at the moment going, well, is that an electric car or is it not? We should have a new agreement. If it doesn't come with a plug, if you have to put fossil fuels inside it, it can't in any way be an EV, even though Nissan call them e-Power EVs. You have to put dinosaurs in there in order to turn it to electrical energy. Well, apart from the occasional small city compliance car, it's fair to say the majority of early EVs were sold in the mid to large range cars. The Mercedes Smart EV is pretty compact. Here in the UK, the original small EV was called the G-Wiz. In China, they've had a couple of very small EVs. Maybe you've driven the Renault Twizy, and the sides open to the elements. But what about something even smaller? What about a micro EV? This one is going to be 31 inches, yes, wide, and 63 inches long, and it's the brainchild of some German engineering. It's called the IEV X Expanding Car. You can actually fit one person in it without really any elbow room, and if you've got a large bag, well, think again. But then again, this car can grow. It will actually get longer. A whole 24 inches longer, enough to squeeze in someone behind the driver. And maybe you're shopping as well. Frankly, on American roads, driving a car so small, I would be terrified of things like the 18-wheelers. But here in Europe, where the roads are smaller, maybe it makes more sense. The range is 37 miles, and don't expect to set any speed records, 28 miles an hour being the max. I imagine that is with one person on board as well. If you fancy one, drop by Kickstarter. They've launched their Kickstarter page. Have your $2,150 at the ready. And I'm not joking when I tell you there's even an upgraded version with a pedal system to boost battery range. Doesn't sound like an upgrade to me. Well, their Kickstarter says this: after 16 years of research on the most ideal and sustainable solution for urban transportation, we discovered that we want to make a vehicle built for the future. We want something to save the environment, save space, and is comfortable and safe. So we started with problems and found solutions. We made a vehicle that is 100% electric. Changes size based on the needs with a robotic, flexible body platform. And it's comfortable due to having a chassis, body, dashboard and a seat. We conducted a survey with friends, families and strangers to see what was needed in an urban setting, what their vision of the future transportation was and how we could make an idea closest to their imagination. Drop by their Kickstarter page, follow the link in the show notes. Well, Michigan utilities have been proposing a bit of large investment. The two largest utilities in Michigan, DTE Energy and Consumers Energy, are looking at, in particular, time-of-use charging rates. Two proposed EV charging programs worth a combined $20 million worth of investments, according to Robert Walton in Utility Dive. In its application, DTE told the regulators that electrification of transportation offers a range of benefits like reduced operating costs for the drivers and affordability benefits for the customers. Most EV charging takes place overnight at home, effectively utilising distribution and generation capacity during low load period. Therefore, increased EV adoption puts downward pressure on rates by spreading all those fixed costs. It spreads all those fixed infrastructure costs for the utility companies over a greater volume of electric sales. Follow a note if you're interested in the kind of energy side of stuff in the show notes. Well, Richard Stubb from Bloomberg New Energy Finance has got a great interview talking to the ChargePoint CEO. ChargePoint, the operator of the largest EV charging network. They build stations for homes and businesses and then connects drivers using their mobile app. The CEO is Pasquale Romano, and he's been talking to Bloomberg NEF this month. Highlights of his answers, and it's a long interview. I'll give you a couple of highlights. Go and follow the link in the article, in the show notes, to read the article. He says this, and I quote, "Even with the relaxing of EPA regulations, you still have manufacturers in the balance of the globe having to conform with standards that are being set elsewhere. If you're going to sell globally, you're going to have to dump most of your money into EVs. And I think that's what you're seeing with most big global auto manufacturers." End quote. So here is someone in the know at the sharp end, a CEO of a big charging company, saying even if the current administration in the USA is going to relax those pollution rules, the fact that even in Europe, for instance, by 2020, we've got some really strict new emissions rules coming in to do with the entire fleet of cars you sell, for instance, then that is incentivizing EV take-up and EV production amongst the big automakers. So even if one country these days, even if a country as big as the USA decides to allow as many polluting cars as possible, it won't make a difference, really, because that EV train is a-running and you can't stop it. He also says this, and I quote, "Battery prices are about $154 per kilowatt hour at the moment." That'll be at pack level. And there's gotten there dramatically faster than anyone predicted. Once you get down to the magic number of $100, we can see EVs reaching price parity with gas cars. Every country except the US has either local or macro-level regulations pushing for the electrification of transportation. And in major cities, for air quality reasons, we're talking about close-in bans on internal combustion vehicles, end quote. Well, there, he just nails like three things that we've talked about on the podcast already. How cheap batteries are getting, how we're going to get to $100 per kilowatt hour really soon at pack level, how macro-level regulation is forcing companies to make electric cars, and how the pollution in major cities will mean at a micro level, mayors and city regulators will just start banning diesel if there's a public health outrage that makes the politicians look bad. Well, thank God for Tesla and the Chinese, he says. They're forcing reconciliation with the transition from a very efficient gas drivetrain industry to this new industry. It's far more than that. It's an excellent interview with Richard at BNEF. The article is online and I put a link in the show notes. Way more to read. Final story today, and Penske Truck Leasing are the latest name to be added to the consortium, which is the Charging Interface Initiative, or CHARIN, I'm not quite sure how you say that. An alliance formed to promote the CCS charging standard for both passenger vehicles and commercials. Well, Brian Hard is the president and CEO of Penske, and he says this, and I quote, "As a leading services provider to commercial fleets, we feel standardisation around electric vehicle charging and charging stations will help accelerate the use of EVs within the transportation industry. The interoperability of vehicle charging stations over the road is essential for commercial fleet uptime, efficiency, maintenance, and the ease of use for the industry." End quote. Well, that's interesting. There's lots of people who I see these days online arguing for just one single charging standard. And I think that's going to be a tough ask. China are never going to move away from GBT. Is it called GBT? Mind, I've had a bit of a brain fade all of a sudden. I think that's what it's called. Tesla, of course, have their proprietary connector. Here in Europe, well, of course, all the Nissans have CHAdeMO. Everybody else seems to be favouring CCS. Well, who is behind the German-based CHARIN? It represents many, many names across the industry, not just the car makers. People in charging like ABB and Allego, Audi, BMW, Bosch, ChargePoint, Daimler, EVgo, Fiat Chrysler, GM, Group Renault, Honda, Hyundai, Ionity, Meneses, Opel, Phoenix, Porsche, PSA Group, VW, Volvo, and in that group of companies promoting the CCS charging standard, Tesla. I'll leave it there. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast today. Thank you so much to new Patreon supporters. David Prescott has joined as an executive producer. David, I appreciate so much the financial commitment that you make to this show and helping it get out to thousands of people around the world. William Miller, a new producer of the show, and H2050, a new supporter. Thank you very much. I do appreciate you being on board, and I'm looking forward to hopefully learning from you guys as well if you want to join in with the community online. A little mention to some of the guys I've been talking to today about hydrogen. There's a bit of a one-sided argument in the EV community, which is that hydrogen is folly for passenger vehicles, but I really want to learn more about it as well, which is why I'm eager to learn from people who might listen to this that are a fan of using hydrogen and fuel cells for passenger vehicles, because it's easy to take one side, but if I'm honest, my knowledge is patchy with it. I'd love to learn more. If it's your area of expertise, please get in touch, because it seems to me to only make sense where the infrastructure is like boats and planes and trains, and not for passenger vehicles where we can put some PV on our roofs and get out from under the thumb of a handful of very large, rich companies who force us to go to their forecourt where they set the price of the fuel that we travel on. Seems like it's an amazing once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get away from that. But if I'm wrong, let me know. I'd love to learn more about fuel cells. Heading to the community section, by the way, Mark Tiller sparked off a conversation on the YouTube comments about the Aussie government. The Australian government, says Mark, is trying to get a nation energy guarantee. He says, I'm not 100% clear. I don't think many people are what the nation energy guarantee is. He says the implications aren't very clear. Basically, they are cutting or stopping rooftop solar, battery storage at home, solar power, wind power and renewables. New coal power stations, which ignore the Paris Climate Emissions Treaty, are being favoured. Coal and more coal, says Mark Tiller. If you've got any comments on that, join in on YouTube and on the Facebook comments, maybe email. The email address is hello@evnewsdaily.com. Hello to Earhart, who's always got good comments online. He says this: the website from the commercial you mentioned is ridiculous. All right, let me give you a little bit of a backstory. If you haven't downloaded yesterday's podcast yet for the 14th of August, we're talking about a massive new advertising campaign funded by Electrify America. Remember, that is the Volkswagen Volkswagen, you've been naughty money. And apart from installing a massive infrastructure of charging stations around America, one of the things which they had to do as penance is to have a big advertising campaign to promote EVs. Part of that is a website they've created called plugintothepresent.com. That is plugintothepresent.com. And Earhart says it appears to be legacy car manufacturers only that get a mention on this website. The fact that they don't have a single Tesla in their Explore EVs is a farce of a website that is pretending to inform about all EVs. This is obviously a website with a specific commercial agenda and no intention of supplying unbiased information and education about EVs. The big auto manufacturers are trying to sell their products, and most of which aren't even in production, says Earhart. Agree? Disagree? What's your thoughts? Leave a comment on Facebook and YouTube. I'd love to see what you think. You can email the show as well. It is hello@evnewsdaily.com. There's 211 previous episodes of this podcast, all online for free. And thanks to our Patreon supporters, they always will be free for you. On iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, TuneIn, Stitcher, and the blog evnewsdaily.com. If you subscribe, you get them first and free and automatically. And if you could do me a massive favour, I know it's a big ask, a little review, a rating review, star rating, 1 star, 5 star. You give it what you think it's worth, and a few words. I know it's a big ask because you're busy. You might even be listening to this podcast because you are busy, and it saves you time trawling the internet because you can do something else while it's on. It would mean the world to me. Find out what we're up to on the socials by looking for EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow.